Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Body Learning, and today my guest is Richard Brennan. Richard is an Alexander Technique teacher, author, and the director of training at the Alexander Technique Center based in Galway, Ireland. And he has published or republished what I guess one could call Alexander's fifth book, which I think is unknown to most people. And we're going to talk a bit about that project and why that book is important. Richard, welcome to the show.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you once again. So this book, the title, I'll read the full title, is called Conscious Control in Relation to Human Evolution in Civilization by F. Matthias Alexander. And I have a copy in my hand of the book that you've republished, which looks to be a kind of a paperback replica of the original. The cover, I suspect, comes right off the original. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's about 50 pages, and it was published originally, I believe, in 1912, shortly after the first version of Man's Supreme Inheritance was published. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, how did you even find out about this book? And
Okay, well, it's an interesting story. In about 1998, I was doing a workshop in Tobago, in the Caribbean, and there was a few people from London coming over to do the workshop, and one of them said, "Oh, I have a book about that was written by Alexander. I found it in a second-hand bookshop, and I find it very hard to read, and would you swap it for one of yours?" So I was delighted, but not only that, when I opened it up, it was actually signed by Alexander himself.
yes,
And
and
then,
there's a replica of that signature on the back of the back of
yeah,
the cover of the book. Yeah.
that's right, yeah. So when I opened it up, I immediately thought, well, this must be another version of CCC, because all I saw was conscious control, and I thought this might be an earlier edition of CCC. So I just put it in the drawer for safekeeping because it was signed, and I actually never read it because I've already read CCC, constructive conscious control of the individual. And then it's only about 5 years ago I went to the drawer, I got it out, and I started to read it. And it was totally unlike any other of the books that Alexander had written. In other words, it was written very simply and very methodically, and I could follow it very, very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then I looked more closely at the signature, and I realized it was 1912, which was about 5 or 6 years even before Constructive Conscious Control came out. And then I started digging around and realized that it was a completely different book to MSI or CCC.
Mm-hmm. Although there is some overlap, right? The photographs of Alexander and someone showing the proper way to stand and so on. I
Yeah,
believe that
that's from MSI.
MSI, but
Yeah.
some of the photographs overlap with MSI, but the text seems a bit different in places.
Yeah, some of the text overlaps in the constructive conscious control,
Mm-hmm.
and the photos overlap in MSI,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost like a bridge between the two books.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not quite sure what happened, but as far as I'm aware, or as far as I can work out, there was only one print run of the book. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think he started to write Constructive Conscious Control. So he just let that book go out of print,
Mm-hmm.
and then he did a much bigger, what he thought was a better version. And I actually personally think when I started reading the book, I thought this is a really interesting book because although there's nothing completely new in this book, it is set out in a way that's actually, I could even give it to one of my pupils
Mm-hmm.
and they would be able to follow it.
Mm-hmm. And I do think there's some material in there that's not anywhere else. Is that your impression?
That's my impression too, yes.
Yeah, there's some quotes and some paragraphs that I don't recall ever seeing before. So having determined that this was an interesting book, I assume you had to go through some trouble to get the rights to reproduce it.
Well, in a lot of countries, the rights are already out, but
Mm-hmm.
I did contact Jan Fisher,
Mm-hmm.
and he is the spokesperson for the Alexandra estate. So we're actually in talks with them about the rights, and there will be royalties to pay on the book anyway
Mm-hmm.
to the estate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
But the book itself it is kind of amazing, like a throwback to old time book covers. I mean, it looks like it is exactly the cover that was the original Methuen book probably had. I assume the original was a hardcover with a dust jacket.
Yeah, it was, but I didn't have the dust jacket. I just had the original,
Hmm.
and I took it to the printers, and I wanted something almost identical to what was actually on the book. So what you'll actually see is almost a complete replica. The only thing is it's a paperback instead of a hardback.
Right. And so would you say that its main value, to me, it seems like it has two important components. One, it contains some original writing, but as you say, it's also a bridge between two of his books. And from a historical point of view, anyone who wants to know all about Alexander's intellectual development, this would be something to read. But also, as you say, it is quite readable, and
Mm.
in some ways more readable than most of his books.
Well, to be quite honest, apart from maybe the example of evolution of a technique in the use of the South,
Hmm.
I would actually say it's the most readable um, writings of Alexander ever.
Yeah, and so it's something that one could give a student or even someone who's just interested in learning a little bit about Alexander and the technique.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also it's very interesting. It's concise. It puts a technique into a very small area, which is very concise. The book is only about 50 pages long,
Hmm.
and people could read it in an evening or two
Hmm.
and come away with a feeling that they knew what the Alexander technique was about.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I know that you have copies for sale and you have a page on your site that gives information on how to order it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So I will put by this interview, and I'm going to I think I'm going to create a blog post around this as well. I'll put the information on how to order the book, and I recommend this to anyone who has a serious interest in the technique and also wants to share some pretty readable writing by the great man that hasn't been available in this format before. Is there anything you want to add before we come to a close?
Yeah, I mean, I did actually talk to Giora Pincus, who's been a teacher for nearly 60 years now,
Hmm.
and he actually had a copy. And the way he got a copy was he was actually training at 16 Ashley Place, and for some reason he went down into the cellar to get something, and he came across a stack of these books,
Uh-huh.
but they were all water damaged except for one.
Uh-huh.
So presumably when 16 Ashley Place got demolished, the books went with him. So I just thought, because it was the only one, almost the only one I'd ever seen, I just wanted to share the book with other people, and that's why I republished it.
And when you first told me about this book, I because I had never heard of it, I did. I went to Frank Pierce Jones's book to see if there was some reference, and he does mention it, but really in passing,
Hmm.
and doesn't say anything much about it. And I don't know if there's a reference to it anywhere else, but it's certainly something that most Alexander teachers and students would have no idea about. So, as I think you've referred to it, as it's really Alexander's fifth book.
Yeah, it's kind of lost fifth book.
Lost fifth book,
Yeah, yeah.
possibly his sixth book, or because the authorized summaries, which is also a very valuable book for people to look at, could be maybe considered
Hmm.
his fifth book in terms of when we found out about it, and this would be his
Yeah.
sixth. But in any event, this is a valuable addition to Alexander literature, and I recommend people get it. So, unless you have anything else to say, this probably be a good place to bring the interview to a close.
Yeah, there's just one last thing.
Sure.
I actually heard that somebody else has seen it. Alexander Murray has actually seen it
Hmm.
on Marjorie Barstow's living room table, and apparently it was her favorite book out of all of them that she actually carried around with her.
Yeah, she was very, very big on use of the self, for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
Don't remember seeing it there, but I could imagine that she would like it because of the clarity of the writing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, my guest today has been Richard Brennan, an Alexander teacher, author, and director of training at the Alexander Technique Center in Galway, Ireland. I'll put a link to his the page on his website where you can learn how to order the book, and hopefully you'll sell out all the copies you have, and maybe have to order some more.
Okay, well, I hope so too.
Well,
I'm not sure I'm going to be ordering more because it was quite ordeal to get back in publishing, but I do have a few hundred copies that if people want to order it, I'm more than happy to send them one.
okay, so don't delay. Get your copy before they run out.
Yeah.
Richard, thank you so much for being on the show today, and for undertaking this project.
Okay, well, thanks, Robert.